Hi, I'm Rachel Alexandria Arnold, and I was co-director, executive producer, and 100% that bitch, being Karen, in Theta. In the beginning of Theta, Jack finds out he's dying from cancer, and Karen goes from best friend to uber supportive best friend. And what was new about me playing a role like Karen is that this is the first time that I went from organizing chaos or recruiting other people to kill, and I was rolling up my sleeves and getting my hands dirty and actually killing people myself. Some of the small details that you don't think about, when you take on a role that is a killer in one of these movies is, can you see? So many of our killers wear a mask, and we wore masks in this movie even though it wasn't a stab, in the stab universe, that it was difficult to see. Wearing a costume. We had an easy costume. It was, basically all black in our Theta sweatshirts, but we don't always film in the best climate to be in a hoodie. You know what I mean? Especially when you're in a hoodie and a mask, breathing in your own air, sweating to death. It just was an added element that you had to think about all the time. It was always on your mind. The other thing that you had to think about is now you're the one swinging the knife. You're the one swinging the tool. And we haven't had the greatest track record of people not getting injured. Even though we take so many precautions and we coach people through scenes like this that are going to involve weapons so that they don't do things that will increase the risk of getting hurt. It still has happened. And so now I'm like, great, I don't want to be that person that we're now talking about in these documentaries that's harmed somebody with one of our our tools of torture. So that was constantly in the back of my head. I was glad that though there were early talks of finding like a real but not powered chainsaw, that we ended up with a fake one, because if we had a real one, I don't think it would have been a good thing for me, especially because I was supposed to be, this crazed, addicted to killing person and had to get into it, and I was, reckless with that chainsaw. I don't think it would have ended very well. I became addicted to the bloodlust of killing people, and I am very mistrustful. You see our relationship as characters shift from supportive best friends to almost a love-hate. Like, I've put up with Jack's shenanigans, and it's starting to really wear on whether or not I feel like we should still be that level of friends throughout this movie. So we go through all of these, internal struggles about how we feel about each other throughout the entire movie, and at the end everything, ends up fine. Jack doesn't actually have cancer. It was a lab error, and we end up happy on a beach. And it's kind of ironic because we started as just normal best friends, and now we have this weird secret that we've killed all these people, and we still end up happy, which doesn't happen often. The bad guys don't typically get away, but in this instance, people can struggle with, were we really bad guys, or do we have bad behavior because of a bad situation? Because this was our first original film, we really wanted to be able to work directly with the actors and bring our ideas on this original concept to the forefront. So in order to give us that time with the actors as we were filming, Josh and I filmed every interaction we had between each other in the movie first, which was really interesting and probably the least productive filming I've ever done in my life. As much as we, have to play that role of mom or dad on the set and make sure everyone is on task and moving forward so that we're not taking forever, Josh and I are, don't tell anybody this, we are the worst at this, especially when we're together. We didn't know our lines. We kind of were just like, it's fine, we'll do it. We've done it 100 times, we'll do it. And we did eventually get those lines. Every once in a while there was some real trouble. We just were like, we'll be fine. And we play off of each other so much, even in real life. Like, it's very, very rare that I see Josh or hang out with Josh that we are not dying at one point just of laughter. And that's how we are when we film, and we learned that through this project. So after Josh and I finally finished filming our segments that we had together, we started bringing in people that were in scenes that were still smaller. So, scenes that only had maybe one additional or two additional actors or actresses. Mud and Bubba Tooie are characters that we have never written in. They're not really human. Mud is this 1000% hillbilly, not quite to the hills have eyes concept of a hillbilly, but almost there. Bubba Tooie, however, is very much the hills have eyes. She's this like creature that is supposed to be a result of lots of inbreeding. Trying to move a fake body wrapped in a carpet in the middle of a busy area of Manchester was absolutely terrifying, but also quite hilarious. Poor Chuck was dropped so many times. He lost limbs. They went sliding downstairs. The apartment building that's directly across from him sees us trying to move this body down the stairs, and it very convincingly looked like a body in a rug. And you just hear them scream. I don't know if we have it in the outtakes, but you hear someone scream, "That better be fake!" And we just kind of keep moving. They don't even stop a beat, really. I was pretty sure that the cops were going to end up being called on us, but never happened. Not that time, anyway. I got some hands-on camera experience in this movie as well, but maybe not at the most opportune times. One that sticks out for me is the dream sequences that we're filming of, you know, Jack and Bridget and Will, and they're having this three-way makeout session, which is really just a dream that Josh is having. I'm the one filming that, so if you notice while you're watching, there's at times this like really maybe cool to you, but really oddly placed up angle to catch the weird three-way kiss. That's actually me directly laying on the ground underneath them with the camera pointed up at the sky, essentially, watching my best friend and my other friends like try and act their way through the most awkward three-way kiss probably in the world. So this was the first film where we really split the idea of the movie into two separate locations that were huge locations, right? Because we're in the Greek life of universities and colleges, so we need fraternities and sororities. We filmed the fraternity first. Tina, who was great and let us use her house as a fraternity house, allowed us to come and film there. And so her place is really the main focus of anything to do with the fraternity. So even though some of our cast had been in movies before that we've done, because I was living in Pennsylvania, this cast, aside from Josh and Ashley, felt like a brand new cast. Like the entire movie was new to me. It was like walking into a new movie, basically, and especially this fraternity, because everybody that was in it was somebody that I had never worked with. Our pledge cast was great. We had, you know, Mark McCarthy, we had Jack Karen and Lamar and Dan, and it was so much fun. Oh, Chris, of course, how could I forget Chris? They were such a strange mix of personalities and acting abilities, and it all really seemed to work. I remember how well everybody seemed to meld, like they had been working together forever, so it was really cool to see, you know, that cast come together. There was this really uncomfortable scene between Mark and Dave, you know, in the morning in the kitchen, and I remember laughing at just like how affected Mark was by it, because Mark and Dave have been friends forever, but the minute Dave had to like rub Mark's shoulders, he instantly was like angry and uncomfortable, and we had to stop a couple of times like to make sure he was okay to continue. He did eventually work through it, and the resulting scene is quite funny, and the outtakes are quite funny as well, and that weird tension is what we needed to make their characters believable, but it was quite an ordeal. Mark, you know, gets his throat slit, and Josh is obviously wearing this mask, and it's very hard to see, and at one point Josh gets a little too close and swiping at Mark's neck, and Mark instantly was like, you know, you actually sliced me. He starts freaking out, which absolutely, probably very scary, but when we turned all the lights on and started to inspect the damage, it was the smallest mark I'd ever seen, to the point where, not even exaggerating, we had to like get in close and see what he was talking about, because he's like, "Oh, it's hurt, you cut me, I'm bleeding," and it was the smallest little mark. The skin wasn't even broken, and he just freaks out, like instant anger, which again, some of it I understand because maybe he was a little scared, but for the mark that he actually got, way of an overreact in my opinion. No offense, Mark. In the party scene, the epic party scene, which was so cool to put together, just the lighting and the music and the whole vibe of it being this gigantic fraternity, you know, house party was really cool. But what we hadn't accounted for was that in order to make a party look realistic, you need alcohol. And in the past, alcohol had really been a problem, and so we ended up making a rule that nobody could arrive, you know, to film their scenes if they were intoxicated by alcohol or drugs, because we've had problems where people trying to get in character have gotten so intoxicated that they literally could not film scenes. And just for the safety of everyone, we never wanted to be in a position where someone drove home after filming, and they were intoxicated and maybe one of us didn't notice it. So we decided it was a good idea to make it a role. Now in this instance, Tina was helping us find extras, and so she made it seem like a party so that people would come and be realistic, but that did involve alcohol. And there was this group of 2 people that came, and one of them was very obviously already intoxicated. The other I'm pretty sure was too, but not nearly as obvious. And in the scene that we're filming, they need to run away and they need to get down this narrow hallway. And the girl that already arrived intoxicated eats it, like wipes out, gets right back up, even though it looked like the most painful fall, like trip and fall ever, gets right back up, is like, I'm okay, and just keeps going. And Josh ended up using the footage, even though it should have been a blooper, because it was authentic. She was wasted and she fell hard and it was funny, so we used it. We had a huge cast because we had to make it look, realistic and convincing that there was a fraternity and a sorority. So we had to fill bodies basically so that it looked realistic. And because of that, and because we had so many out-of-staters, Josh and I were running around constantly. And so there's many points in this movie for the first time where maybe I'm actually filming scenes and Josh isn't even on location. And then maybe later I'm running to get food to physically feed the cast and he's filming things. So there were a couple of points about this that were interesting. One, even though Josh is very comfortable filming, and I had done some in the past, it was the first time that it was really up to me to direct these scenes instead of just film them at Josh's direction. And I really kind of reprised my role of stage mom or, cast mom, because there were so many people staying at Josh's house or staying locally in a hotel that, in order to make sure everybody was taken care of, we needed to feed them, and we needed to also help them if they needed to find things in a city that they had never been in, or run lines with them, because everything was moving so quickly. We needed to make sure that they were truly ready, that when someone was filming their scene that they were good to go. So there were several times that I actually bought groceries and cooked for this entire cast. So we had filmed so much at the fraternity house and really tried to get as much as we could out of the way that it finally came to be the time that we needed to start working on the sorority stuff. So the first thing that we filmed was actually still at the fraternity house. It was 3 of the sorority sisters. When Sabrina, Grace, and Maria all show up to the fraternity house, and obviously the president is already dating someone and they're starting to mingle with the fraternity brothers. Some of the things that I remember about this is that Ashley literally would not take direction well on her lines. She was overacting every single line written for her. And I just remember Josh and I continuously trying to be like, try and bring it down a little. You're kind of making yourself a caricature and not an actual character. And it did not matter. Whatever we said, nothing worked. She just kept overacting everything. And what was most frustrating about that is that we had to keep feeding her her own lines, because unlike, the past experiences when we had dealt with her and she was on top of it and ready to go, she was kind of a mess this time around. She didn't know her lines. She constantly wanted to go out and party. She was obviously staying with Josh, and it just was not a good situation. So another weird thing that happened was Maria was aggressively making out with Imad, and when she first started, it was funny for the scene, and then it just kept going. And I think that she was getting excited to act and start getting into her character, and maybe she got a little too much into her character. But I just remember everybody that wasn't involved in that particular scene that was still on set was very uncomfortable watching it happen. And I think Imad might have been a little uncomfortable too. The fraternity house kind of fell in our laps. Tina was great and allowed us to use her house, and we were allowed to decorate it. But when you're decorating for boys, what do, right? You just kind of take stuff away and minimalize it, because guys don't typically, this is a stereotype, but in movies, when you're seeing fraternity houses, they're not neatly decorated, and it's, you know, very worn furniture, old furniture, or, you know, next to nothing in the ways of home decor. So that's always easy, but when you take a whole house full of girls, now you need a house that's very specialized. You're not going to see a whole sorority in that type of house. So we had to find one that fit, and we did finally find it. It was expensive, but we found it. And, you know, just trying to facilitate scheduling and finding a weekend that all of the sorority sisters and some of the fraternity brothers could come to film these scenes was next to impossible. I honestly feel like it took us 6 months just to all agree on a date. So when we finally, you know, booked the house, agreed on a date, kept sending out reminders, even going as far as just isolating parts in the scripts that they really should focus on for that weekend and sending those out separately, even though they had full scripts, for it then to get canceled because just everybody basically, except for the 4 of us that lasted, didn't show up, was so infuriating. And I don't think I've seen Josh angry, but I don't think I've ever seen him that angry. And I think that there was a lot that went into that, not just the fact that, you know, we spend our own money, as we say time and time again, but the actual preparation of all the little details, making sure there was food, making sure people had their lines, knew what they needed to wear, you know, trying to corral everyone's travel plans when they were going to be arriving. And mind you, this is now the 3rd movie we're working on that we're having similar issues where people are quitting. I think we lost over 25 actors in Theta. It almost seemed like a joke at one point because, like, it couldn't have been real that we were losing that many people. We had people who would sign on and never show up for their first day of filming, or never show up for their read-through, or they'd come for their read-through, film 3 scenes, and never come back and just not talk to us. The overwhelming feedback is like, you know, I'm not getting paid and it's not my commitment, which was frustrating for us because if we could pay all our actors, we would, but we couldn't. So that weekend, we really took a blow, the fact that people didn't show up. And Ashley, ultimately, I would say Ashley is the reason that the movie finally got shut down, because she was supposed to be at that weekend and didn't show up. She was going to find a replacement to bring with her, and then nobody showed up, including herself or her replacements. She never knew her lines. She started to sort of unravel, and just her behavior was bizarre. And so with her having such a large part and that weekend being canceled because nobody showed up, like, it was clear that this was now the 3rd movie we were dealing with that needed to get shut down. And so that was frustrating. And we can release all of the footage we want to and, you know, fill in the blanks of things that weren't filmed of scripts, but it's never going to be the same as a full movie. It's never going to show all the work, you know, that we put into it. Even when a movie is done, you don't see all of the background work that we do, but you get a better picture of what went into it. But here, we're literally just inserting words where scenes should have been, and those scenes would have made the movie. So, yeah. Theta is probably started my most favorite, ended my least favorite.